Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So welcome to you all to another installment of the Monday meeting, and we're continuing our commentary on Kitab, at-Tawheed, the book of monotheism, Al-Imam Mujaddid Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. And inshallah ta'ala tonight we'll be looking at chapters 36 and 37 from the work. We'll be summarizing those two chapters and looking at them together because they are very closely related. And those two chapters, the first of them is the chapter in which the Imam, he says, Babu ma ja'a fi riya, the chapter regarding ostentation or showing off. And the second chapter is the chapter in which he said, Bab min ash-shirk iradsul insan bi amalihi ad-dunya. He said the chapter regarding, or the chapter clarifying, that seeking worldly gain from good deeds is a form of idolatry. And so, as we said at the outset, these two chapters are closely related because both of them refer to cases wherein the motives for an act of worship are not entirely pure and involve associating another with Allah. So the motive is not entirely pure. What is motivating the person to do the deed is not Allah's pleasure fahasb, or Allah's pleasure exclusively, but rather the person is motivated by that and something else. And so you have this this corruption, or this mixing of the intentions or the motives, which corrupts the intention and removes its, or denies it, its purity. And obviously, as we know, one of the fundamentals of our religion is al-ikhlas, purity of intention, right? To the point that the Prophet ﷺ, he indicated to us that the primary basis for the acceptance of a deed and the reward that we get for it, or the recompense, is the intention. As he said in the hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. He said actions are but by intentions, and every person will be rewarded or punished for his deeds based upon his motives. So in the first chapter, the Imam, he talks about, or he mentions this word ar-riya, which we translate as ostentation or showing off. And this ostentation, it involves an associating, or association in the motives. And basically it involves associating other individuals with Allah as the motivation for the good deed. So the person, they're going to do the good deed, and inshallah they're going to do it for Allah's sake. But along with seeking Allah's reward, they want something additional. They want to be witnessed by the people. They want the deed that they do to be witnessed by the people. And they want to garner acclaim. They want to garner praise. They want to garner admiration from the people through this deed. So that's one motivation that the Imam is going to talk about. The second motivation he's going to talk about is a person being motivated that his deeds are being done rather than for the praise of individuals or seeking the praise of individuals. He has some worldly interest. He does a good deed, but he seeks through that good deed to attain some type of worldly interest, some type of material benefit. This person is also guilty of association. The only difference is what? The motive itself, the nature of the motive. In one case, he was motivated by what the people would say and if they would admire him or not. And the other case, he's motivated by some type of worldly gain. So what does the Imam want to achieve through these two chapters? So as we mentioned previously in previous lessons, we've been talking about how the Imam in this section, we're in this large section, where the Imam is talking about things which are incompatible with the Tawheed. Things which they could be totally incompatible, meaning they nullify Tawheed entirely, or they could be partly incompatible and therefore they diminish the reward of the Tawheed or its purity. So he's in that section, and this is definitely applicable to that section. In addition to that, inside that larger section, he has another section where he's dealing with a'mal al-qulub. He's dealing with the actions of the hearts. He's dealing with the things that, or the actions that the heart performs that people don't necessarily see, but they have an impact on at-Tawheed. And so he's teaching us through these chapters to be mindful of what? Of the heart, and to realize that the heart can also commit a shirk. And the heart's actions can also undermine at-Tawheed. And the heart can be a cause for our deeds not to be accepted. In fact, they're the primary cause, because of the hadith, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Actions are but by intentions, and every person will be rewarded or punished for his deeds based upon his motives, right? To the point that, and this is true not just for example, you'll be rewarded for good deeds or punished for evil deeds. No. A person could actually be punished for a good deed because he has the wrong intention. So for example, two people could be, we just offered Salat al-Isha, and two people could be offering Salat al-Isha right next to each other. And one of them could be offering for the sake of Allah, seeking his reward and seeking the hereafter. And the other person could be offering it to be seen by the people, right? So that people will praise him and say, oh, how pious, look how pious he is. He comes to the masjid for Salat al-Isha, etc. And so this person will be rewarded, and this person could actually what? Be punished. طيب. So this is what the Imam wants to teach us, that basically, so in the course of that, or these two particular chapters, in these chapters, he wants to emphasize al-ikhlas, sincerity, purity of intention. And he wants to warn us Muslims from diminishing or completely nullifying our good deeds by failing to fulfill what? This shart. By failing to fulfill or check this box, fulfill this condition. Because at the end of the day, as the Prophet said, our actions will, the reward or punishment for those actions will be determined by what? By our intentions. طيب. So now, ar-riya, the legal definition for it, according to the scholars, is idhar at-ta'abbud lillah. لِأَجْلِ رُؤْيَةِ النَّاسِ. Worshipping Allah in plain sight in order to be seen by people, with the intention of being seen by the people. So the person is doing an act of worship which people can what? They can observe it, like salat, right? Like giving charity, right? Like calling the adhan, like cleaning the masjid. These are all good deeds that people can see. And a person does that with the intention of what? Of being seen by the people and hopefully getting or garnering some admiration, some praise, some accolades, etc., or some acclaim from the people. Now, if you look at the definition, idhar at-ta'abbud lillah. So the person is worshiping who? Allah. The person is worshiping Allah. They're not worshiping the people. They're worshiping Allah. They want to be rewarded by Allah. But they also want to be what? Praised by the people for worshiping Allah. So they're not worshiping the people. If they're worshiping the people, that would be shirk akbar. That would be major idolatry, and that would take them out the fold of Islam. It would make them a mushrik, an idolater, and a disbeliever. But if a person intends to worship Allah, but they're motivated by what? By what they hope to attain from the praise of the people, their repute, whatever. Then that's what? What are they doing? They're associating. There is a level of shirk, but not the level of shirk that would take them outside the fold of Islam. So it's a form of what? Of minor shirk. Ar-riya is a form of minor shirk. So since the person intends to worship Allah, not anyone or anything else, and because our religion has called it shirk, but it's not the type of shirk that will take you outside the fold of Islam. We don't have any indication where the Prophet said that the person who commits ar-riya will have to what? Renew his Islam or becomes a disbeliever. Then ar-riya is considered what? A level of a form of minor shirk. It's something called shirk. Your person is associating, right? They're guilty of association, but they haven't reached the level of what? Of major shirk will take them outside the fold of Islam. Now, one of the things that our religion stresses, and the Imam kind of touches on this in a number of the ayat that he quotes, or the ayat and the hadith, the text that he quotes in the 2 chapters, is that no one should be an object of worship for us except who? Except Allah. But in addition to the fact that he's the object of worship, his pleasure should be what? The sole motivation. It should be the sole motivation. Or at least, as we're going to see, the primary and principal motivation. You guys see that? So sole, or at least the primary or principal. And we're going to see why that makes sense a little later. Okay? So the primary or principal motivation for the worship should be what? Should be Allah. He should be the sole object. When we're worshiping, we should be directing it towards Allah. And also he should be the primary or principal source of motivation for the worship we perform. We do lidalik, and this is supported by a number of ayat and hadith, because our whole religion is founded upon this concept of ikhlas, doing things for Allah's sake. But one example comes to us from Surah Al-Kahf. It's the last ayah, the last verse in Surah Al-Kahf, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. Say, O Muhammad, I am merely a mortal like you. The only difference being is that the only difference being is that it has been revealed to me that your God is one God, meaning Allah. So whoever hopes for the meeting with his Lord, let him work righteousness and associate none as a partner in the worship of his Lord. So now if you look at this verse, it stresses the importance of having pure motives from a number of angles. First of all, he said, Yuha ilayya annama ilahukum ilahun wahid. It has been revealed to me that your God is one God. If our God is one God, then he should be the sole object of our worship and the primary what? Motivation and reason why we worship, right? Number two, he said, فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادَةِ رَبِّهِ أَحَدًا. And associate none as a partner in the worship of your Lord, again emphasizing and stressing purity of motives, purity of intentions. Remove, basically saying, if you want to succeed, as we're going to see, remove what? Remove any impurity, remove any association from what? From your acts of worship. And last but not least, Allah called these two things, right? Called this removing of association, purifying of your intentions. He basically called it the key to what? The key to success. He says, فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ. Whoever wants to meet his Lord, meaning he wants to meet him and he's pleased with him, right? So basically he's saying this is the key to being successful is what? Is removing what? Association. So all of these are angles from which Allah is stressing and emphasizing to us we need to have pure intentions, and we need to make sure our motives are what? Are also pure. Mumtaz. Tayyib. Now, suppose our motives aren't pure. And when we do something with what? With the people in mind. We do something with the people in mind. Then our religion teaches us that doing that will render our deeds null and void, right? So they'll either be completely unacceptable or at least partly unacceptable, meaning let's say you have this deed which consists of many parts. And at some portion of it, a person thought about the people. Then that means what? That part of the deed would then be what? Null and void. You wouldn't receive a reward, but the rest of the deed you could. And so it can diminish the reward you receive, or it can entirely what? Nullify it. Mumtaz. And we know this because of the hadith where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where the Prophet said that Allah says, أَنَا أَغْنَى الشُّرَكَاءِ عَنِ الشِّرْكِ فَمَنْ عَمِلَ عَمَلًا أَشْرَكَ فِيهِ مَعَ غَيْرِي تَرَكْتُهُ وَشِرْكَهُ. He said, I am the most independent and the least in need of an associate. So whoever performs a religious deed while associating others as partners with me, doing so for others along with me, I will leave him along with his act of associating others with me. I will leave him and leave his shirk. So now this hadith is pretty unequivocal, right? That if a person's deed is corrupted, the motive for his deed is corrupted by ostentation and the desire to impress others, Allah will do what? Will leave it. And that means he'll refrain from giving any reward. But now the question comes, is the deed null and void in the sense that it's as if he never did in the first place? Like, imagine that a person made wudu and stood up to pray. And while they were praying, They passed wind. What would happen to that prayer? What if they continued and completed the prayer? Would they have prayed? Would they have prayed? Would the box be checked for them in the heavens that they prayed? That prayer is considered what? Null and void. All right? Yajibu i'adatuha. You have to what? Repeat it, right? You have to make it up, basically. So now the question is, if a person commits a riya, if he shows off, he commits ostentation, now is that deed not only not rewarded, because there's a difference between not getting the reward, but getting what? Getting credit. Are we saying that not only will he not get a reward, but he also won't get credit? It's as if, just like the person who passed wind during Salat, he has to go back what? And pray again.
It would be negative.
I don't think he would get any credit.
He wouldn't get any credit?
Because he associated with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So you're saying it's like he passed wind during prayer. So
I'm saying that because Allah says subhanahu wa ta'ala
hey.
that anyone who associates with him, Allah said he would diminish that.
So he'll
who they associated with.
taraktuhu wa shirka. Okay, I will leave it. So does leave it mean I'll leave rewarding it only, but not necessarily leave what? Giving credit. Or does it mean not only will I not reward it, I also won't give credit? That's the question, right?
Oh, it's definitely the worst.
Huh?
I say the worst because I think that it should be, like I said, if you leave with any credit, it should be negative.
Negative.
So like, if you leave with anything, punishment.
Negative in terms of what? Al-ithaba, the reward. So you'll get a negative reward, like a punishment.
Yeah.
But what about the deed itself? Did you pray dhuhr? Let's say a person came and he saw someone and he was like, I want this person to think highly of me. So I'm going to offer this prayer and I'm going to offer it in a way that's going to impress him, I hope, right? And so the person has that in their mind while they're offering prayer. Now, taraktuhu wa shirka, I will leave him and his deed. We know it means what? You won't get a reward for it. The question is will you get credit? Will you get credit? Did he pray or not? Or is it like he didn't pray?
He prayed, but he prayed for so and so. So he gets to.
Now, did he pray for so and so, or did he pray to impress so and so? Because we said ar-riya, you're worshiping Allah. I'm doing this for Allah. I'm not praying to him, right? But I'm praying to Allah to what? To impress him. I kind of want to get what? I want to have my cake and eat it too. I want to get two for the price of one. So now the question is that will he get?
Nothing.
He'll get nothing. Not even the credit.
Not even.
طيب. Okay, let's talk through it. طيب. So basically the scholars, when they come to this issue, they say that basically ostentation, ar-riya, is divided into what? Two categories, right? Two categories, two levels if you want. The first one is riya'un mahd. It's total, pure ostentation. Complete, total ostentation. The person didn't think of what? Of anything but what? But the people. Okay? He is entirely motivated by what? By the people. That deed is completely what? Null and void. It's like he didn't even pray. It's like he didn't even pray. No reward and no credit. Right? And Ibn Rajab, he said, هذا لا يتصور من مؤمن. He said, this is something that you cannot imagine that a believer would do this. That a believer would stand up in his home and offer prayer. This is an act which its benefit is confined to what? To the actor, the one who performs it. And he's doing it in his home where nobody can what? Can see. It's unimaginable that that person would do that and do it for what? To show off, to do it for the people, right? He said the only person who would do that is a munafiq, a total hypocrite, not a believer, right? But the second category of ostentation, ar-riya, is what we could call riya'un arid. What the scholars call riya'un arid, which means it's transient, it's momentary, it's a momentary ostentation. Meaning what? It's fleeting, it's passing, it happens, and then what? The person kind of gets a handle on it and kind of rights the ship, basically, and rights the ship. Okay. So now, the scholars of Islam say this second category, is divided into what? To two categories, right? So you got the person who, from the moment they stand up to pray, for example, or at the outset of whatever deed that they perform, at the outset, from the very beginning, they're motivated by what? By the people, right? I come for dhuhr, there's time between the adhan, the iqamah, and I don't generally offer the sunnah. But some people are here, and I don't want them to say, oh, this you're going to offer sunnah. So I offer what? The sunnah. And I'm only offering so they don't say. So from the very outset, what's my motivation for offering it? Pleasing the people. I'm going to worship Allah, but the only reason I'm doing it is because of what the people are going to what? What the people are going to say. Exactly, what the people are going to say. So this one is also what? Null and void. So if he wanted to get credit for that prayer, he'd have to what? To repeat it with sincerity. Why? Because what is the number one condition? Al-Ikhlas. And he didn't have Al-Ikhlas in what? From the beginning. So he had no what? Foundation to what? To build on. You guys see that? He had no foundation to build on. Now I'll give you another example. Last example. Suppose the person stood up to pray. 4 units of prayer. First unit, sincerely for Allah's sake. No association whatsoever. Second rak'ah, it occurs to him, what? The people. The people are watching. And so he associates those people with Allah. Wants what? Their accolades, their praise. And then by the third unit, he what? He rights the ship and reaffirms his intention to what? To pray for Allah's sake.
He only get half of the salah.
So what? He only get half the credit?
His first intention was to serve
His
Allah.
first intention was to serve Allah, and at some point during the prayer, he lost his way, and then he righted the ship. So now this person, is he going to get credit for the prayer?
He get credit for the intent.
Does he get credit for the prayer? Is he like the person who passed win or not? This person will get credit for the prayer, but his reward will be what? Diminished in accordance with the amount of what? Of association that he did. With the amount of association that he did. And so, in any case, he's what? He's a loser.
I have a question.
And in 2 cases, he's what? He lost the prayer entirely. Go ahead, Akhi.
You know, there's hadith in, from Hadith Qudsi,
Hey.
the individual who will receive, 1/3, 1/4
Uh-huh.
of the salah. But this individual fall in that category.
I don't know if he necessarily falls into that category, but I think it's along those lines in the sense that his reward was diminished. His reward is diminished. He can't get the full reward because at some point, one of the things that would give him the full reward, he didn't have it. He didn't have it. He lost it. That would be that purity of intention. But what it does teach us is, one, the importance of intention, that we have the right intention, we have purity of intentions, and that we maintain the purity of intention throughout what? Throughout the ibadah. It's also important, and we're going to circle back to this later, but it's also important that we realize that this is not something just specific to what? To those ritual acts of worship. Everything we do. Because notice the Prophet said, innamal a'malu binniyat. He said actions. And the word he used for actions is what? It's general. It encompasses anything that we do with the intention of with the intention of what? Earning Allah's reward or Allah's pleasure. All of those deeds are what? Are by intention. And will be rewarded or punished based upon what? Based upon our motives. You guys see that? And so it's very important that we, before we take a step, before we do anything, that we actually think, why am I doing this? Am I really doing this for Allah's sake? Imagine, for example, we were in a class with this big scholar, and we're all students who are vying for, how can I put this? I don't want to say vying for his attention, but when you have like a well-respected, credible scholar, teacher, you kind of want to be that guy in his eyes, right? Or that girl in his eyes. You guys see that? Yeah. And so let's say that we're all vying for that, right? Especially since this is a person who, if you're that guy, they will what? They'll do what they can to propel you to greater heights in academia, let's say, scholarship. So we're all vying to be that guy. Now we're sitting in a circle and he's talking about a particular subject that we've done our own research on it. Or maybe we've sat in other classes with him and we're very familiar with the topic. And so now I'm going to raise my hand to ask a question. But I'm not raising my hand to ask the question because I want to what? I want to know the answer. I'm raising my hand to ask the question because what? I want the other people to say, whoa. Yeah, exactly. What an amazing question. Or I want the teacher to say, that's a good question. I'm glad you asked that. Right? And then I'll be like, you guys see what I'm saying?
It's still the same thing.
So when I do that, and I do it with that intention, that's against me. You guys see that? Nobody knows it except what? Except me and who? Allah. That was my intention. That was my motive. That was the reason. That's what motivated me to say what I said. You guys see that? And so again, we just have to always be mindful, because these deeds, the motives behind them are going to be what? For us or against us, right? And we have to make the choice. طيب, before we transition, Ibn Taymiyyah, he talks about something else, a concept that the Imam didn't mention, but it's related to this, and that's al-ujb, which basically means conceit and an excessive sense of self-importance. And he said that this ujb, it's similar to ar-riya, it's similar to ostentation, and it nullifies deeds the same way that ostentation does. And he said, why? Because when a person does ostentation, when they commit ar-riya, they're associating the people with who? Allah. With Allah, or the people's pleasure or their acclaim with Allah. And when a person is what? Self-absorbed and self-conceited and full of themselves, they're associating what? Themselves. You guys see that? They're associating themselves. So if at the end of the day, they're both guilty of association, then what? The consequences should be the same, and the rules should apply equally. طيب, I want to mention a hadith that the Imam didn't mention, but it's actually similar to one that hadith that he did mention. It talks about, again, it drives home this point about being sincere and avoiding what the Prophet called shirk as-Sarair, which basically means inconspicuous motives of idolatry. So he said in the hadith, he said, أَيُّهَا النَّاسِ إِيَّاكُمُ الشِّرْكَ السَّرَائِرِ. He says, "O people, beware of inconspicuous motives of idolatry." So they said, "Ya Rasulullah, wa ma shirku as-Sarair?" O Messenger of Allah, what is meant by the inconspicuous idolatry? He replied, he said, يقوم الرجل فيصلي فيزين صلاته لما يرى من نظر الرجال إليه فذلك الشرك السرائر. He said, when a man offers prayer and beautifies it because he realized that people are watching, this is the inconspicuous idolatry of motives, idolatry of motives. So all of that has to do with the first category that we talked about, or the first thing that the Imam talked about, which is ar-riya. So then the Imam, he transitions to a person desiring worldly things or worldly gains through their good deeds. And he begins that chapter with the ayah from Surah Hud, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Man kana yurid al-hayat ad-dunya wa zinataha, nuwaffi ilayhim a'malahum fiha wa hum fiha la yubkhasun. Ulaika alladhina laysa lahum fil akhirati illa an-nar wa habita ma sana'u fiha wa batilun ma kanu ya'malun." So he says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, what means, he says, whoever desires a life of the world and its glitter, to them we shall pay in full the wages of their deeds therein, and there will be nothing withheld from their share. It is they, and this is the important part, he says, it is they for whom there is nothing in the hereafter but the fire, and vain are the deeds they did therein, and of no effect is that which they used to do. So notice he said, there is nothing in the hereafter for them but fire, and vain are their deeds in the hereafter. Why? because they were motivated by worldly concerns. They did what they did good deeds, but the whole motive, the whole impetus for their doing of good deeds was what? What they hoped to get from worldly gains, from material benefits, etc., etc. So Allah says that their deeds were nullified. Then there comes the hadith where the Prophet echoes what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, and he contrasts, and in order to echo this sentiment, he does this contrast and comparison between two types of people. In terms of what? In terms of deeds. The one who is motivated by worldly concerns and the one who's motivated by Allah's pleasure. So he mentions the famous hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ta'isa abdul dinar, Ta'isa abdul dirham, Ta'isa abdul khamisa, Ta'isu abdul khamila, in u'ti radi, wa in lam yu'ta sakhit, Ta'isa wan tukis, wa idha shika falan tuqish. So that's the first part of it. And that first part, the Prophet said, perish and ruin be the lot of the slave of the dollar. Perish and ruin be the lot of the slave of the cent. Perish and ruin be the lot of the slave of the khamisa, money and luxurious clothing. And then he goes on and he says, perish he. And then he says, and he explains why. Why perish he? Pleased if these things are given to him. Pleased if what? If he gets. And if not, he is displeased. Let such a person perish and relapse. And if he is pierced with a thorn, let him not find anyone to take it out for him. So that's the first one that the Prophet, and notice the words that the Prophet used. One, he called him a slave of the dollar, a slave of the cent, the slave of luxurious clothing and finery, right? He called him a slave of that. Is that praise? Yeah, that's a rebuke and a reproach, right? For the person who the Prophet described as being a slave. Then he explained what makes him a slave. He said, pleased if he what? If he gets, and displeased if he doesn't get, which means that his heart, his loving and hating, his being pleased and displeased is linked to what? Is linked to what? To what he gets, right? So you could be the most wicked and iniquitous person. You could be a very, very bad person. But if you give him, you're what? You're the best person. And you could be a very, very good person. But if you don't give him my way, you're what? You're bad, right? And I can't see any what? I can't see any good in you, right? And I'm going to bury you. And I'm going to, speak negatively about you. Not because you're really bad, but because what? You didn't give me. You guys see that? The Prophet said, this is what makes you a slave, because what? Your heart your heart is attached, right? It's inseparably linked to what? To the world. And what? It turns back and forth. Pleasure and displeasure is totally determined by what? By worldly things. If I get what I want, you're okay in my book. If I don't get what I want, you're the worst. The Prophet contrasts that with what? With the next person. He says, Tuba. He says, Tuba لرجل لعبد أخذ بعنان فرسه في سبيل الله أشعث رأسه مغبرة قدماه إن كان في الحراسة كان في الحراسة وإن كان في الساقة كان في الساقة إن استأذن لم يؤذن له وإن شفع لم يشفع. So he contrasts between that and the person whose heart is completely attached to what? To Allah. And he doesn't care about the dunya. He's not impacted by the dunya and the dunya, whether he gets or he doesn't get. Regardless of what's going on around him, it's not going to change who he is, because what? His heart is completely attached to what? Allah. And the one consistent thing is what? Is Allah. So he says, Tuba, every kind of pleasure and bliss or a tree in paradise is promised for him who holds the reins of his horse to strive in the cause of Allah. With his hair unkempt and his feet covered with dust. Doesn't care about what? His appearance. Doesn't care about his appearance. Because what? I'm doing Allah's work, right? Then he says, if he is appointed in the vanguard, if he's put in what? In the front of the army, right? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Could be a good thing because what? You're at the front, you're the vanguard, you're holding what? The banner. It also could be a bad thing in the sense that what? If you get attacked, You're going to take the brunt of that, right? And some people might say, no, I want to be in the middle, right? I want to be in the middle. Some people might say that. But if he's in al-harasa, if he's in the forefront, he's what? I'm fine with that. And if he's what? Fisaqa. If he's in the very, very back. And some people say, well, that's not good. It's not good to be in the back, right? The forgotten people. Bringing up the rear, right? But he says what? Wherever you put me, I'm happy with it. Then he says, if he asks for permission, if he asks for audience with the ruler, he is denied audience. And if he intercedes, his intercession is not accepted because of what? His simplicity. But he doesn't care because he wants to what? To please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so in this way, the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us the importance of what? Of having the right motives, the right intentions, and that our intentions, if they're corrupted by what? This world. And wanting something from this world. And that's our primary concern, our primary motivation, our primary impetus for doing any good deed. That what? It'll be null and void. You guys see that? And if you look at the hadith, the one that we mentioned at the outset, which is basically one of the most fundamental teachings of Islam, is the hadith where the Prophet said, "Innamal a'malu binniyat," actions are but by intentions, and every person will receive a reward or a punishment for his deeds based upon his motives. And then he went on to explain, to give a practical example, because he always used to like to take these theoretical concepts and bring them down and give a practical example so they would be accessible to his companions. They would know how to live these hadith and not just what? They would not just continue to float around in their heads on a theoretical, esoteric level. So he said, فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. So he who migrated to Allah and to his messenger, then his hijrah, his migration is to Allah and his messenger. That was a practical example. They were living that example. People were leaving Mecca and leaving other parts of Arabia and joining the Prophet in Medina. They were making hijrah. They were living that example. So he was telling them, if you did this with this intention, then what? Your reward is going to be tremendous, immense. Then he said, وَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِدُنْيَا يُصِيبُهَا. But he who migrated for the sake of some commodity that he hoped to obtain. There was something there. There was some type of trade. There was some type of market he thought he could corner. Right? Nobody's selling this there. If I go there, exactly, I have a monopoly. That's what he had in mind. I'm not migrating because I'm being persecuted. I'm fleeing persecution. I'm not migrating because I want to worship Allah more freely. I'm not migrating because I want to be with Allah's messenger. And if he goes out for jihad, I want to be there to fight with him and to have his back. No, I'm going because what? I want to have a monopoly on this what? I want to corner this market. And he said, or for the sake of some woman he hoped to marry. Again, what? There's a family there that if they said, if I come, they'll marry me to their niece. They'll marry me to their cousin, right? And that's the whole purpose and motivation why he went. Then the Prophet said, فَهِجْرَتُهُ لِمَا هَاجَرَ إِلَيْهِ. All he's going to get out of it is whatever he actually went for. طيب. So now that said, I want to ask you guys a question, closing out with this. And that is, suppose a person didn't act to worship for Allah's sake. He wanted Allah's sake. That was his primary motive and his primary impetus. But at the same time, it was like, I'm doing this for Allah's sake. But if I do it for Allah's sake, there's also potentially going to be something in it for me from the world. There may be some worldly benefit. The worldly benefit is secondary in my mind. The primary reason why I'm doing this is for Allah's sake. But this good deed, doing it, could potentially garner me some type of worldly benefit. Is that the same as the person who did the deed purely for some worldly gain? Is that okay to do? No. Is it okay? I'm doing it for Allah's sake, but in the course of it, I'm probably going to get some type of benefit as well. Tayyib, what do you guys think? Yes, no, or want to just abstain and see what happens? Hey.
I think it's still gonna be attachable to shirk.
Oh, let me give you an example before you say that.
Okay.
Like, suppose a person said, man, I can't wait for this Ramadan. I can't wait for this Ramadan. Person says, why? Yeah, I'm really looking forward, to, all the spiritual benefits that Ramadan brings, at-Tawheed, how we come together, we eat together, the camaraderie, reading the Quran, so on and so forth. I'm excited about just earning Allah's pleasure and earning His forgiveness. But also, I think that a good month of fast would be good for my health. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Ramadan to go on this like juice diet that I've been wanting to go on and lose some weight and kind of like get my system regulated. What do you think?
I think it's kind
What do you think?
Because and Allahu A'lam wants to.
Huh?
Yeah,
You say it's okay?
Good.
You like that?
Yeah, that's
But you were just about to say shit.
No. The first one is because you're talking about.
But he wants something worldly. He wants what?
No, it's not worldly when you look at it in the spiritual sense,
Weight
because
loss.
you're supposed to keep yourself healthy for the sake of Allah.
Okay.
This is our diet of Islam.
Yeah, if you put it like that and try to,
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, he says, yeah, I'm one of the reasons why I want to fast is for my health, purely for my health. I want to get in shape, right? I want to get ripped. I want to get my system together, right? Because I got this probiotic thing, And so that's, to me, that's purely dunya. Now you can try to make it like, well, if you're healthy, worship, but that's not really what the person is saying. The person is saying, I do want to get Allah's reward. That's my primary impetus. But in conjunction with that,
I got some
I can,
36s I need to get back in.
exactly. I can kind of like what? I can conflate the two. I can put one, or I can layer one on top of the other and I can get two for the price of one.
I think as long as in that perspective,
Hey.
it's gonna be mixed with shirk.
So you think it's shirk?
Because it's a worldly.
I would say it's shirk.
You mixing the two, and I'm saying that because alhamdulillah.
No, but it's
Go
the
ahead.
same example before with the prayer, where if you start out correct, like you get the reward based on your intent that's for Allah,
Yeah.
and the part that's for health benefits, there's no reward in it, but it's not like.
So you wouldn't get the full reward. So you wouldn't get the full reward for the Ramadan then. You put all that work in, and every time you go to put the juice in the blender, it's like that reward goes down. Is that what we're saying? Because that's what we said about the prayer. That you offer rakatul ula, the first rak'ah for Allah. The second one's kind of shady, and then you get back on track. Third and fourth is for Allah. And we said it to do what? Diminish the reward, but it won't nullify the deed. So now this person comes and he tells you before Ramadan starts, hey, I'm doing this for Allah and I'm looking forward to all the benefits from Allah, but I'm also looking for something worldly out of this. I want to get something worldly out of this. I want to what? I want to get in shape. People have been teasing me about this pot belly, man. Ramadan in, it's going to be like washboard, right? That's what the person is saying to himself and telling other people that too.
It's not purely upon ikhlas.
Is that association? Okay,
The primary motivation is to please Allah and do what Allah is asking you to do. And then it just so happens that you have a worldly benefit that comes along with it.
It can be like a byproduct.
Yeah, I don't
Byproduct.
see
Okay.
anything wrong with it.
Tayyib. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys a hadith. Okay, alhamdulillah. All right, before I give you the hadith,
It's like a full cleanse. Might as well.
Okay, so before I give you the answer, I'm gonna tell you guys that there's something called a shirk, which we know when we've been talking about it for what? For months. A shirk association. Could be major, could be minor. We talked about some examples today of what? Of minor shirk where a person associates the people, associates their own selves, or associates what? Worldly gain. You guys see that? All right. There's also something called a tashriq. A tashriq, as opposed to associating, you do what? You conflate. You lay something on top of what? Something else. And you take them what? Together, but the pleasure of Allah is the primary. Sometimes you make a tashriq, you desire Allah. You desire His pleasure, His paradise, His pardon. But in addition to that, you want some worldly advantage. That comes what? That can come along with it. And you want that. That's part of your motive, but it's not your primary motive. Your primary motive is what? Is Allah. The other form of tashriq is that your primary motive is Allah and His pleasure through what? Through the deed itself. But that deed can also what? Can also have a byproduct or an associated or a conflated religious benefit. So sometimes you want Allah and the world, and sometimes you want Allah and what? And the deen, right? Two forms of tashriq. And I'll give you examples and then you tell me what you think. The first example comes to us from Al-Bukhari and Muslim on torch of Anas. In the hadith in which the Prophet, he said, من أحب أن يبسط له رزقه وينسأ له في أثره فليصل رحمه. He said, whoever would like, whoever longs, whoever wishes, and yubsat lahu fi rizqi, he wants to do what? Take his wealth and do what? Expand it. He wants to make what he he wants to make it even more what? He wants to grow what he has. And he wants to do what? To extend his lifespan. He wants to have a longer life. He wants to live longer. Are those worldly things or religious things? He wants to be richer and he wants to live longer. Worldly things. These are world things, right? These are material things, material benefits, wealth and long life. The Prophet said, if he wants to do that, then let him do what? Join the ties of kinship. Join the ties of kinship. Is it an act of worship? Yeah. When you join the ties of kinship, primarily, what are you seeking by joining the ties of kinship? Allah's pleasure. Allah's pleasure. But the Prophet is saying, he's basically authorizing us to do this good deed for Allah's sake with what? With a conflated, what? Worldly intention. That you can do this, your primary goal is to please Allah. But you also have what? In your periphery, right? Some worldly benefit. An additional what? Additional motivation, additional wind in your sails to do the deed. The Prophet is saying what? It's okay. It's okay. Because what? What's your primary goal? To please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you can also get what? Get this side benefit, which comes what? Which comes what? As a byproduct, right? Not the primary impetus. So that's an example of wanting Allah's face from the deed or through the deed, but at the same time, wanting something from what? From the world. But that worldly thing is what? Is a byproduct. It's not the primary intention. That's what what the scholars call at-Tawheed. Give another example. Sometimes a person wants the deed and the reward he'll get from the deed, but there's also another religious benefit that can come side by side. So it's almost like he gets what? Two for the price of what? Of one. And that example is the hadith collected by Al-Bukhari Muslim on Ibn Mas'ud, in which he said that the Prophet said, Ya ma'ashar al-shabab, O audience of young men, man istata'a minkum al-ba'a falyatazawwaj. Whoever amongst you is able, has the financial capability to get married, then let him what? Get married. فَإِنَّهُ أَغَضُ لِلْبَصَرِ وَأَحْسَنُ لِلْفَرْجِ. He said, because marriage will help him to lower his gaze and guard his what? His chastity. Then he said, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ. And whoever can't get married, doesn't have the what? The financial means at this moment. فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّوْمِ. So then let him what? Fast. فَإِنَّهُ لَهُ وِجَاء. Because it'll what? It's a shield for him. It will help him what? It'll help him to what? To suppress his desires. Now, fasting is a good deed, is it not? And whose sake should it be done for? Allah's sake. But the Prophet is teaching us that there's also what? An additional religious benefit you can get, which is what? It helps you to avoid the haram. So a person could have the intention, I want the reward for the deed of fasting itself, but I also want the reward of what? Or I want the good deed of trying to what? Avoid the haram. So he could have this what? This conflated attention. There's no association like we talked about previously. Associating people, associating yourself, associating the what? The world. But it's what? It's conflating. I can put this on top of this and what? And get both of them together. Get both of them together.
Is it the same when Allah says fantashiru fil ardi?
Hey. Well, here he's saying do your act of your ibadah and then what? And then go out. Then go out, right? Then go out. So basically he's saying do your act of worship, and after that you can feel free to seek the dunya. seek the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So, with the example you gave, where there was a specific hadith in regards to the benefit of tying the kin, the ties of kin, the ties of kinship, and then you get the benefit, and that is specific. So, with something being an innovation, if it's specific to religion, then if it's not, and from what I understood, that when it's been presented previously, that when it comes to religion, anything that goes beyond what has already been said by Allah or His Messenger, is an innovation. So if we go beyond the specific examples of the Prophet sallallahu an example, would that kind of go into the area of where it could be considered an innovation, saying it's okay for me to do this, even though I'm doing it for Allah's sake, but I'm going to get this benefit too, if it wasn't an example that was specifically given by the Prophet?
I guess I would need a specific example, and then we would know from the example if.
That's what you were saying with the fasting. Taking that example, if there's not something specific like that benefit of losing weight or getting healthier, or whatnot, if it's not something that's specifically been said, is it still considered okay to have that intention along with the fasting for the pleasure of Allah and the obligation during Ramadan?
I don't think so, because I think that the example that the Prophet gave, the one who desired to expand or grow his wealth, and he wanted to extend his life, then let him join the ties of kinship. So now what we can't do, which is in line with what you said, is we can't create a link between some spiritual or otherworldly benefit. We can't create a link between that and some act of worship when we don't have a basis. So we couldn't say that if you did X deed, your wealth would grow. If you did X deed, your life would be extended, if we didn't have evidence for that. But as far as a tashriq, I think what the Prophet is teaching us, and there are other examples of it, and there are enough examples to show that it's something which is not specific to the text, but rather it's general, that the Prophet is teaching us that there's this concept of what? A tashriq, the concept of tashriq. And the scholars themselves have looked at these hadith and said that there's something in the deen called a tashriq, and they didn't understand it to be something specific to the specific examples. So that's where it's different from other things, where we say, yeah, this is specific to this example and we don't have anything. For example, last week or maybe a couple weeks ago, there was a question about the woman who came to the Prophet, because we were talking about a person being patient upon aqdarillah, being patient upon the decrees of Allah, which are bitter and unpleasant. We talked about being patient, we talked about being pleased, we talked about the difference between being patient and being pleased, etc., and so on. And that came up, and the question was asked, could we take that woman who came to the Prophet ﷺ and she was having epileptic seizures, and she asked for the Prophet to pray that she be relieved of that illness, and the Prophet said, if you want, I can pray for you, and if you want, you can be patient and you'll have paradise. And it was asked, could we say then that it's better under every circumstance, whatever the hardship is, to be patient and you'll get paradise? And we said no. Why? Because the wording of the hadith indicates that what? It was something specific to that case, and even we could argue to that woman, because he told her, if you are patient, you'll get paradise. As if Allah is informing him that this will be her blessing. But we have no evidence to make that broader and say anybody who has epilepsy, if they're just patient with it, will go to paradise. That's not the way the hadith is worded. And so it has a lot to do with what? With the wording. It has a lot to do with the preponderance of evidence. We have lots of examples where the Prophet indicated tashriq. So for example, one example is the people who go out for jihad. They go out for jihad, and what's the potential benefit of going out for jihad in our religion? Spoils, right? Well, obviously that's a spiritual benefit, martyrdom. But what if you live and you defeat the enemy? There's spoils of what? There's spoils of war. Is that not so? Okay. So is it possible that some people go out with the intention of pleasing Allah, waging war for Allah's sake, and also what? What they might gain of what? Of wealth and benefit? And that's an indication that what? That tashriq is acceptable, right? So there's enough evidence to show that it's not something specific to the examples the Prophet gave, but it's something that can be done in the deen, provided that what? that certain conditions are met and certain guidelines are followed. Because if we're not careful, we can be from the people who make our deeds entirely for what? For the world, and fool ourselves into thinking that what? Oh, no, I'm trying to get Allah's pleasure too. You guys see that? Right? So we could fall into association if we're not careful. But it's something that we should be aware of, that at-Tashriq is something that is from the deen.
That's a very thin line.
Right? It's from the deen. And so if a person did come and say, hey, yeah, I'm looking forward to this Ramadan, you're fasting for Allah's sake, but also it's an opportunity for me what? To lose weight. Right? If they had their heart in the right place and the priority was Allah and wa dar al-akhirah. I want to do a couple takeaways really quickly before we close out. The first one, because it's a very important chapter, or 2 chapters, and it's something that we have to continuously remind ourselves about the importance of intention. And so the first one is that we have to recognize that no matter how well we hide our intentions from the people, Allah knows our true intentions, no matter how well we hide it from the people. And there's lots of examples of this in the Quran itself. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about the hypocrites during the battle of Uhud. In the battle of Uhud, the people who betrayed the Prophet and abandoned him. He says, يُخْفُونَ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ مَا لَا يُبْدُونَ لَكَ. He said, these people, they hide in their hearts what they don't reveal to you, O Muhammad. Right? Which means Allah knows what they were hiding. They were saying something to him and telling him what he wanted to hear. But in reality, what? There was something else in their hearts, and Allah knew it. He knew what their true intentions were. Also, he also says in the same surah, Surah Al-Imran, he goes further and he says, وَقِيلَ لَهُمْ تَعَالُوا قَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَوْ اقْتَلُوا. It was said to them by the believers, fight in the way of Allah. Defend what you believe in, right? Or at the very least, what? Idfa'u. At the very least, defend what? Defend your city and your women and your children, right? Okay? If you don't want to fight in Allah's way and really stand up for what you believe in, at the very least, what? Defend your women and folk and your children folk. You know what I mean? Don't just run away from the battlefield. قالوا, those people, those hypocrites, they said, لو نعلم قتالا لاتبعناكم. They said, if we really believed that there was going to be a fight, that something was going to happen, we would go with you. We just don't believe anything's going to happen. We think it's a waste of time. But that really wasn't the case. That was just something they said. So Allah responds and said, "Hum lil kufri yawma idhin aqrabu minhum lil iman." They, on that day, when they mouthed those words, they were closer to what? Disbelief than they were to faith. Then he says, يَقُولُونَ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ مَا لَيْسَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ بِمَا يَكْتُمُونَ. He says they say with their mouths that which is not in what? In their hearts. And Allah is aware of what they conceal. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that what they said was not in their hearts, and what was in their hearts was in total opposition to what they actually said. And he knew it. They couldn't hide it from him. They could hide it from the Prophet, right? And sometimes they would pull the wool over his eyes, and he would admit that some of you come and you tell me these good stories, and I believe you because I'm a human being. But if I give you something based upon what you tell me, because you're just very good at at telling the story and weaving this web and so on and so forth, spinning the wheel, whatever they call it, spinning the yarn, whatever it is, and I give you a coal because of it. I'm sorry, if I give you something because of it, I give you a flock of sheep, I give you a piece of land. This person comes and says, no, this is really my sheep. And I say, no. His argument is convincing. I give the sheep to him, but it really is his sheep. He says, what I'm actually giving you is what? An ember from the fire of hell. Right? Because why? Allah knows, right? And that, the next takeaway is that if you know, when you read that, and you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He really knows what our intentions are, that should make us what? Make us afraid. Afraid of trying to to play games. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what our intentions are. The third thing I want to say as far as takeaways is that sometimes we ourselves, we may not know our own intentions. We may not know our own intentions. We may convince ourselves that what? My intentions are what? Are pure, and they're not pure. We can be deluded. We can be fooled by the shaitan and by our own what? Our own selves, our own nafs, which gives us the benefit of the doubt when we don't really deserve the benefit of the doubt. Makes excuses for us when we don't really deserve those excuses. What that tells us we have to be what? We have to pay very close attention and not give ourselves too much benefit of the doubt. In one of the verses in Surah An-Nisa, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the hypocrites. The hypocrites who their whole lives were a mound of what? A mound of deception. They had to lie to everybody. They had to lie to everybody.
That's bad.
It's very bad. So the hypocrites were the people who what?
Lie.
We want to ride the fence. You have this new religion, which is emerging, and they're getting stronger and stronger by the day. And you have the existing religion or religions or the religious landscape, right? These people who are in positions of power, but the ground beneath them is not very stable. They could win. They could win. And if we choose sides too early, we might be at a disadvantage. So they wanted to what? They wanted to play both sides. So they had to go to these people and say, we're Muslims. We're on your side. We're with you. And they had to go to these people and say what? As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, nastahzi'u bihim, right? We're just making fun of them. We're just running game on them. We're not really with them. You guys see that? So they had to what? They had to lie. They had to lie to the point that what? They had told me so many lies, I don't think they even knew what the truth was anymore. They didn't know what the truth was. And they themselves didn't know themselves and weren't honest with themselves about how deceitful and treacherous they were. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this in the Quran. He talks about them trying to what? Trying to reconcile between this and trying to basically find some type of middle course between Islam and disbelief. And it doesn't work out for them, right? It doesn't work out for them, and they're put in a situation where now they're confronted. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ثُمَّ جَاءُوكَ يَحْلِفُونَ بِاللَّهِ. He says, then after everything comes to light, they come to you swearing by Allah. إِنْ أَرَدْنَا إِلَّا إِحْسَانًا وَتَوْفِيقًا. We only wanted what was good, and we wanted to do what? To make reconciliation. We had the best of intentions, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُ اللَّهُ مَا فِي قُلُوبِهِمْ. Allah is the one who knows what is in what? In their hearts. Even if they themselves don't know it. He knows what's in their hearts. So these people, at least if you just read the ayah and take it at face value, they're swearing, really, we had the best of intentions. Come on. They're convinced that their intentions were what?
True.
They're convinced their intentions were good, right? And they're so accustomed to deception and treachery and duplicity, playing both sides, right? Having two faces. They're so accustomed to that. They don't know truth from lies, right? Like that one student who was to raise his hand. And he's like, oh, I'm going to ask this question, but I'm really asking for the other students, or I'm really asking what I really want to know. But he knows the answer. But he convinces himself, no, I had the best of intentions. I was asking because I really wanted to know, or I really wanted the other students to know. It was an opportunity for everybody to learn. You guys see that? But in reality, what? It was really for him, and he might get to the point where what? He doesn't even realize what his real intentions were. Unless he what? Takes a step back, which brings us to the fourth takeaway. If he's really, really paying attention, really is brutally honest with himself, and he errs on the side of caution. Let's say I'm that student, and I do want the teacher to look at me like that. I want him to see me like that. I want to see that I'm different. Right? I'm an excellent student. I'm above and beyond what these guys are. I really want that. But at the same time, I think I understand this issue, but I'm not really sure. I could be doing it to impress the teacher. I could be doing it to impress my peers. And I could be doing it what? With a sincere intention. Okay? So now I'm in that situation where I'm not really sure. If I take a step back, I step out of myself. And I say, I'm about to say this. And I'm not really sure if I really have the right intention. But Allah what? Allah knows, and it could go against me. What should I do? Err on the side of caution. Err on the side of caution. Because if we get enough downs, and those downs outweigh what? The ups, we're going to be in trouble. We're going to be in trouble. And so we have to really, really be careful. These are the takeaways from the chapter. We do have to be careful. What we do, what we say. Exactly, the intention. Let's say, for the sake of argument, me and Hamza did business together. It didn't go right. And it didn't go right, not because he's what? Not good in business. Huh? Not because he's not good in business, not because he wasn't honest, not because he wasn't trustworthy, right? But because we had something personal. It was just something personal. And so we decided to what? To go our separate ways. Somebody comes and asks me, what do you think about Hamza? I'm thinking about going to business with Hamza. I say, man, that brother got issues. If I say it in that context, what does a person think when I say he's got issues? Did he ask me about his temperament? Did he ask me about, is he quick to anger? Right? Did he ask me about that? Does he even care about that? He wants to know if I go into business with him, are we going to make profit? Can I trust him? Is he going to steal my money? That's what he wants to know. If I say that in that context, that man's got issues. In the context of him asking me about, should I go into business with him? He's going to think the issues are related to what? Business. Is he trustworthy? Is he responsible? He's going to think he's irresponsible. He's not trustworthy. Right? He's not good with money, whatever. You guys see that? Now, when I say that, do I not know that? Do I not know what he's asking me? And do I not know that the difference, what happened between me and him had nothing to do whatsoever with his business acumen? Had everything to do with what? Me and him couldn't get along, right? His temperament, right? He was quick to anger. I'm quick to anger, right? And that's why we had to go our separate ways. It had nothing to do with his business. But when I tell that, did I actually, in that case, did I tell the truth? No. I didn't tell the truth. And when I said what I said, did I say it with a pure intention? No, I didn't. And even if I convinced myself, I was talking about his temperament, yeah, that's what I said was true, right? Allah what? Allah knows my intention. Y'all see that? And so we have to be careful. We have to be careful. Because again, the Prophet is saying, innamal a'malu binniyat. Your actions are going to be judged by your intentions. And every person will be rewarded or punished for his deeds based upon what? Based upon his motives, based upon what he intended. And with that, we'll bring today's session to a close. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.